Hello, I am Jan Oberg, the director of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, TFF, in Lund, Sweden. I am very happy to connect with you today, however, online rather than directly and in a more personal way, in a more friendly way, but I promise to be friendly during my talk today. I am delighted to see that there are so many people from around the world who are following this, and I will jump relatively quickly to what I'm going to say because the subject is big. It's basically the change of the whole world and what will happen the next 10-20 years, in my opinion. But let me just say that the directorship I have of that foundation is something that is quite unique in the sense that it's built since 1986. Its website has about 7,000 articles and videos about peace, and we're totally independent, totally people financed. You can support us if you like what you hear the next few minutes, and we refuse to be part of the military. We work for the military thinking. We work for the United Nations Charter Article 1, which says, would you believe it? Read it. It's the most important and most Gandhian document the world has. It says that peace shall be established by peaceful means, period. Then there's Chapter 7, and military can be used if everything else has been tried, but no country on earth, except those who don't have a military, adhere to what they put their name under, put their signature under. So let me move on to just saying that I think the majority of those who are sitting here today are from Europe. And Europe is about 8% of humanity. And our future task is to be curious about, interact with, and make peace with the 92% outside. We cannot keep on gazing at our own small problems. We cannot keep on acting as if there's not a big world out there. There is only one world, and it's ours, and it belongs to everyone. It's as simple as that. Now, let me just tell you what I'm going to say. You know, I've studied pedagogics, and I was once hearing somebody who said, first, when you give a lecture, first say what it is you want to say, then say it, and when you've said it, say what it is you've said. So I'm going to tell you now the fine points that I will race through with your permission. First of all, the West is in decline. The US empire will go, and we will have to ask ourselves at some point, was the Occident an accident? Or did it have an accident? Point two, the East is rising. It's not only China, it's Asia, and various parts of what was earlier called the developing world. And then the question, point three, is how will this happen? And will the West be able to survive its decline and recreate itself? Point four, what will the post-corona world look like? The world about which we know only one thing: there will be no going back to normal before corona. And finally, which everybody normally asks me when I give lectures, can we really do it? Isn't it too idealistic? Aren't you too hopeful? Is it really possible to get out of the mess we are in? And I say yes. I don't say yes we can, because we've heard somebody say that before who couldn't. But what I'm saying is humanity has tremendous resources. There's much more love and cooperation and respect in the world than there is evil. And we have to build on that. It's not so difficult. But there is very difficult years ahead until everything gets better. So let me get into the first thing, the decline, fall, whatever you'd call it, of the West. By the West, I basically mean here, I'm not going to get philosophical or cultural, I mean the United States, NATO allies, the European Union, basically. We can discuss where Russia is in this, but I don't think Russia is declining. But, and I'm not saying everything will happen the same way in what we call the Western world. What I am saying is the leaders of those, the Europeans and America, is declining. It's a kind of Titanic at the moment. And we are in denial about it, or most people and leaders are in denial about it, but it will fall. And you may ask, how do you know that? Or why do you think so? And I say, all empires have gone down before. You take the Rome, you take Ottoman Empire, you take British Empire, you take the Soviet Empire. Time has now come to the US Empire, and the US is an empire. There's no doubt about it. Given its economic power since 1945 and up till today, or partly up till whatever it started to decline, militarily, culturally, and in terms of values, the liberal world order and all that, which is also guarded by the military. The largest military in humanity, which is now a burden, a cancer, creeping in everywhere in the American society and boomeranging back from failed wars. Secondly, overextension. Empires go down, big systems go down when they get extended. That means having a management problem. The whole thing gets too big. You do one thing here and you do one thing there, and there's no cohesive strategy, and those you try to interact with don't follow what you tell them to do. Companies get too big, something falls apart and you haven't foreseen it and all that. There's no way everything that is just going bigger and bigger and bigger can survive in the long run. Then there's a lack of legitimacy in the eyes of others. I don't have to give you examples of that. It's pretty obvious that Europeans have a problem with the Americans at the moment. The Americans basically have Washington or the Trump administration or earlier administration having problems consistently with various countries, or more or less the whole world, seeing Russia as an enemy, seeing Iran as an enemy, seeing the allies in Europe not doing what they should do, seeing China as a potential or already reasonably big enemy, etc., etc. And you kind of cannot manage it anymore. You not feel inside that you don't have the power you used to have. And then the crises that have not been taken serious, but more or less denied instead. So there's a loss of vision. No system can survive if you don't have a vision, a long-range vision. And that's where China is stronger. They had an idea 40 years ago where they wanted to go. If you ask a Western politician today, or an intellectual or others, where do you want the West to be in 30, 40 years from now? You will not hear anything interesting. Be it Chomsky or whatever, nothing interesting about the future. All are looking to the past. Then there is warfare and militarism. The enormous sums that have been wasted for decades on warfare, failed wars, predictable fiascos, and of course the enormous drain on the economies of these countries. It's a common mistake to believe that military is good in terms of employment, etc. If you have $100 and invested in civil sectors such as education or health, you get much more employment effect than if you invested in the military sector or military industries, because they are basically high-tech and laboratories, etc., and very little investments in human beings, relatively speaking. It's a waste of money, and it's a double waste of money if it can't create peace, which we have ample evidence that it can't. And so you have also an effect I would call less faith in the system. Most people today have not so much faith anymore in democracy. They don't have very much faith in the development of their societies. Most people now work for themselves rather than, let's say, working for the whole society's betterment. And we have small signs every day that things don't work. I won't go into details. I'm sure everybody listening to this has found out that there are lots of companies who support our department doesn't work. Technology they bought that falls apart. Agreements that are not kept. People's attention span is very short. There's a huge amount of decadence, which is also a sign of decline. and growth in economic gaps between people, class society, outrageous reaches with a few, etc. All this is not going to last. It's not sustainable democratically, it's not sustainable socially, politically. And so what you end up seeing is a lot also of negative energy, particularly from the United States. You see threats, you see demonization, you see everything considered dangerous by Washington. You see sanctions, economic primary sanctions and secondary sanctions, for instance, primary on Iran and then secondary on everybody who is dealing or wanted to deal with Iran. Parenthesis, these sanctions are immoral, they are illegal, and they are the most counterproductive thing you can do. But the Americans keep on using sanctions against, 20 or 30 countries, all a sign of weakness. Otherwise, you would negotiate and find solutions. Demonization, confrontation, seeing enemies everywhere is exactly as dangerous for themselves as it is for those they threaten. It's eating up positive energy that is needed for something else. So there's a new world rising, and that is, of course, what you don't see in the newspapers. If I say the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, most of my listeners here, those viewing this, may say, what is that? It's the Belt and Road Initiative by China, taken in 2013, with an investment of $1,000 billion. It's the world's, if not history's, largest cooperation project ever. And there's nothing about it in, let's say, the Danish broadcasting system. Some of you are sitting there from Denmark, so I mentioned Denmark. It's the same everywhere else. We are not curious anymore, and that's a sign of crisis. We are afraid that somebody is much more smart than we are. So, what will the new world look like? It will be a world with much less borders. The worst borders are those we have in here against other peoples, other cultures, genders, whatever, where we say us versus them. We have built a border. The West is very good at building borders, drawing lines in the sand, and then finding out that it hurts themselves. It will be less mental borders, less physical borders. We will live in a world in which there will be more unity in diversity, and where we will see nation states go down. The idea that the world should be organized in countries with governments is going to be much less important. I'm not saying they're disappearing tomorrow, but we will have regions much more important. We will have regional security arrangements. We will have everything that is going over the nation state and governments, and everything that goes under, that is people-to-people relations, such as in a way that we're doing right now, connecting all over the world through modern technology. We're not talking now with the governments of our countries, we're talking under the government level with people elsewhere, with a tremendous potential for change. That world will be multipolar. There will not be a new empire after the fall of the US empire. And how can I know that? Well, use your common sense. 2 reasons. If China is going to be a very important, perhaps the most important, most likely the most important country in the world, you should know Chinese culture. They're not interested in making everybody else Chinese or turn them into Buddhists or Confucianists or Xi Jinpingists or something like that. They actually wouldn't like it. They want to be special. The idea of a mission, forget it. They're not coming with a sword, and they're not coming with a Bible. They say, can we make money? Can we do something together? Which is good for both of us. Secondly, there is no one who is so stupid anymore. There will not be anyone who think that my system should be what everybody else has, that my system should become global, that my system, our system, is so great that everybody else should have it. There is nobody who can do full spectrum dominance in all sectors over a population that is approaching 8 billion people, and lots of cultures and lots of projects and lots of visions and desires in different ways. We only have one thing to do, that's cooperate about keeping unity in diversity, not becoming uniformity in uniformity. Uniformity is a bad thing, diversity is a good thing for the world and for ourselves. Denmark, for instance, will be a multinational country. There will not be necessarily a majority of Danes. We will see, but we have to learn to live in a multipolar and multicultural world. There will be much more emphasis on culture, creativity, poetry, paintings and whatever, and less on materialism, for the simple reason that the corona crisis will tell us that materialism is over. And lots of people have found out that those shoes or whatever it was they thought were very important, I must have them and all that. When they couldn't go and buy them, they found out that they didn't need it. So we will have to have much more of a stable economy and a non-growing, in quantitative terms, economic system, whether capitalist or whatever, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but something that will be unlimited, limitless growth in quality, but not in quantity. In that new world, there'll be much less militarism. I'll come back to this. But because there'll be no empire and less borders, there will be less militarism, less need for any military, if at all. Over time, we will have to put militarism behind us as we put slavery, absolute monarchy, cannibalism and other bad things behind us. And that, of course, includes nuclear weapons. Civilized people don't have nuclear weapons. I'm sorry to those who are listening from nuclear countries, nuclear power countries. There is no future in having that. So, and there will, of course, be a reformed United Nations. Let's not hurt more than United Nations than we have already done. It's the world's finest organization with the best charter ever written that governments have signed. It's the most Gandhian document humanity has ever had. Now, the UN needs reforms, yes, but it needs also regional UNs, regional Security Council, regional cooperative organizations, and it needs tons of more resources, and we'll get these resources when we get rid of militarism. So let me just finally go back here in this first part of the lecture to the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. It is about, and I said $1 billion behind it, it is about building fast communication, transport, and cultural cooperation from China to anybody who wants to be part of it. It is not owned by China. It's an invitation to cooperate across the world, and it's involving at the moment about 80 countries in this world. In Asia, of course, in Central Asia, in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, in parts of Africa and in South America. Whereas the rest of the West, with the exception of Italy, has said we don't want to participate in it, we don't want to be part of it. So, long story short, it's terribly fascinating. It's full of problems. It does create problems for others. For instance, this project's energy consumption and, production of concrete for fast roads, harbors, railways and all that. But it also has a positive impact, will have a positive impact on the world. And that future world is what I'm going to address in the next part. Thank you so much for listening to this first part. We'll soon move over to the part 2, which will be the last part. Thank you so much so far.